AIM-listed 4D Pharma has seen some positive news recently around the trial of its kidney cancer treatment. The chief executive of 4D joins us now. It's Duncan Peyton. Duncan, welcome. It's great to be able to catch up with you again. We spoke to you just recently, just before the trial results that came through last week, and since then we've seen this big uptick in the share price. The press has been full of the news, and of course over the weekend we've heard more about what's been going on, the press's response to this. You've hit the primary efficacy target for this drug in trial. Explain more about where 4D is now with this trial.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. So in terms of trial, it's really good that we hit the primary endpoint early on in the trial. So, we're seeing a good response in these patients and it's really important that we understand how sick these patients are. And in terms of, this is one of the latest lines of therapy and probably one of the most advanced groups of patients in a study. So, the data that we've got is really meaningful in terms of, 518 hitting its primary endpoint. It's really meaningful in terms of giving us more insight into how MrX518 works. And it's really more, hot on the heels of the asthma data. It's really meaningful and sort of validates our thesis of single strains, acting like a drug. And in terms of, it's meaningful for 4D, but it's really meaningful to, the patients who are, very advanced, very late stage, and to give these guys an extra 6, 12, in some instances 24 months, it's really meaningful. And, just in one case, there was an 82-year-old gentleman, stage 4, which is, really aggressive stage cancer. We saw 100% tumor reduction. Unfortunately, he developed lesions in the brain, but 24 months, he's been on drug and he still remains on drug, and that's just it's a great day for 4D Pharma, but great day for the patients.
Yeah, of course. So we're talking here about these kidney cancer patients, as you say, with very advanced developed kidney cancers and cancers associated with this. Now, my understanding is that the 4D drug was in a joint trial with this study with MSD's Keytrudeau. Now, my understanding is that MSD, which I think is part of Merck, isn't it? The Keytrudeau data is already out in the market, isn't it?
So Keytrudeau is what we call a checkpoint inhibitor, and it's part of the immune oncology therapies that we're seeing. And Keytrudeau is, I think it's certainly one of the biggest selling drugs in the world, if not the biggest. I think it did sort of like around 12 billion last year. Sorry. So it's a really effective drug, but unfortunately, it's only effective in a certain number of patients. And then, within that group of patients that respond to Keytrudeau, some of those patients stop responding. And what we're finding is we can add 518 into those patients whose diseases start to progress after Keytrudeau, and we re-engage the immune system to allow Keytrudeau to do its job.
This 518, I think, to give it its right name, is it MrXo 518? I think it is one of these snappy title drugs as it goes through this process of trial. Now, because this is a combination therapy, do you understand more now about the effects of 518 from 4D's point of view?
Yeah, it's a great question. Everyone wants to understand, what drugs contributing to the effects that we're seeing. What's really interesting here is you wouldn't expect patients who are re-challenged with Keytrudeau to respond again, and that's what we're seeing. And these patients are truly progressive. In addition to that, we've done some work in a monotherapy setting, so just using 518 on its own. So we understand how 518 can change the immune system and change the gene expressions of the tumor cells to be more anti-cancer, if you like. So we're able to show it in a monotherapy that we can push the immune system towards being effective against tumors. And also with the results that we're seeing in the Keytrudeau study, we're seeing a response that you wouldn't necessarily expect to see. And what's interesting from the research that we've done preclinically in terms of what we expect to see with the immune system, we're actually seeing that in the clinic as well. So that's really validating the approach that we're taking in terms of mechanistic understanding of MrX518.
Now, as I said, this is for renal cell carcinomas, this is kidney patients. Is there any evidence to suggest that 518 could be used elsewhere in the body?
So this study also is looking at, for example, non-small cell lung cancer patients. We've seen some initial data in that, which we reported in part A of the study. As we recruit more patients into and more non-small cell lung cancer patients. Hopefully, we'll see a similar response to what we've seen, today or over the last few days with the renal cell patients as well.
Let me just quickly touch on the balance sheet, because we've spoken about this before, the £30 million that was going to come in a number of tranches from Oxford financing. I think that was agreed last summer, wasn't it? Was last week
Correct.
a milestone? Has it released more money for your research?
So it is one of the milestones for Oxford. We're having conversations with Oxford. As you know, the capital markets are quite difficult at the moment, so it's really good to work with someone like Oxford who can provide additional capital to businesses to help bridge across clinical studies. So that's something we're talking to Oxford about.
Yeah. Okay. Let me just bring up a share price chart very briefly. We saw this spike up last week to 56.5 pence a share. It's pulled back a little bit, but clearly holding on to much of the gains that we've seen over the last few days or so. What's next now for this drug in particular, but more broadly for your team at 4D?
I think what the trial shows is we're seeing these responses in patients who you don't expect to respond. And we've always wanted to take 518 into earlier lines of treatment. And I think, if you remember, I was talking about how about 50% of the patients don't respond to Keytrudeau, and that's what we call primary refractory patients. So we want to take MrX518 into early lines of treatment. We'll look at extending the trial into primary refractory patients, but also in terms of other early lines of treatment. We're going into bladder cancer with a different checkpoint inhibitor as a maintenance therapy, so moving 518 down the treatment lines. Those sites have been initiated, and we're looking forward to dosing patients in that study as well. So, there's a lot of interesting data going to come out of the 518 oncology programs, and then we'll start looking at asthma. We'll start, hopefully, we'll start to commence the Parkinson's study later on this year as well.
Good luck to you. Duncan, thanks indeed for joining us. It's a pleasure to catch up with you again. Busy man, obviously. Duncan Peyton, Chief Executive of 4D Pharma. For more videos from us here at IGTV, join us on Twitter at IGCom, Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.